They erased me from my own family, but when they sent me a wedding invitation with the wrong date to ensure my absence, they unknowingly sparked a reckoning that would dismantle their legacy and build my own. The wedding album lay open on Aunt Maxine's coffee table, its glossy pages a brutal showcase of betrayal. Elise Hartman stood still, fingers tingling as her gaze locked on the image of her brother Nolan, beaming beside his new wife. Tomorrow was supposed to be his wedding day. Elise's breath hitched. Her name was elegantly etched on the invitation still in her purse. June 15th, tomorrow. Aunt Maxine's voice, drenched in guilt, trembled behind her. Elise, honey, I thought you knew. The words stabbed deeper than any confrontation could have. The crystal frame Elise had brought as a gift slipped from her grasp, shattering into shards across the hardwood floor. The sound echoed like the collapse of every delusion she had nurtured about belonging in this family. That's not possible, Elise murmured, pulling the envelope from her bag with desperate hands. The date stared back at her mockingly. Aunt Maxine took the invitation, her glasses sliding to the tip of her nose. Oh, Elise! Her throat constricted around the words. The wedding was last weekend. They sent you the wrong date. On purpose. Elise's world tilted. She had taken a personal day from her executive marketing role, had spent countless hours hunting for the perfect gift, the perfect dress, the perfect words to bridge years of neglect. And they had erased her from their celebration without a flicker of remorse. Aunt Maxine's lips pressed into a thin line. They decided it would be easier if you weren't there. The truth no longer needed cushioning. Elise's fingers gathered the broken crystal pieces, each shard a glinting reminder of her misplaced loyalty. They've always treated me like I was invisible. Now they've made it official. Aunt Maxine's voice cracked, trying to explain, to soften the cruelty, but Elise's composure had solidified. Years of bending for their approval fractured in that moment. She would not break herself for them anymore. The next day, Elise parked in front of her parents' Tudor home. She remained in the car, staring at the meticulously trimmed hedges, the polished windows reflecting a facade of familial perfection. Inside, through the bay window, she spotted them. Her mother, crystalline laugh piercing the air, her father reclining in satisfaction, Nolan holding up a wedding portrait. Their laughter carried through the window, careless and cutting. Best decision we made was making sure she wasn't there to ruin everything. Elise's grip tightened on the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. Her heart pounded, but her steps were steady as she entered the house. 3 minutes passed before anyone noticed her standing in the entryway. Elise. Her mother's voice was devoid of warmth, merely an acknowledgement of her inconvenient presence. Elise held up the invitation. The wedding was last weekend. You sent me the wrong date on purpose. Nolan didn't even flinch. I needed one perfect day without you. No pretense, no excuses, just naked contempt. You've always disrupted our peace, her mother added, adjusting her pearl necklace with rehearsed delicacy. Can't you understand we needed one special occasion without your intensity? Her father's silence, as always, was the loudest condemnation. Elise took another step into the room. I've put thousands of dollars into the lake cottage through my holding company. Did you think I wouldn't find out you've been telling everyone it's still yours? Her mother waved a dismissive hand. That's what successful children do. They help their parents. It's your obligation. Nolan smirked, arrogance oozing as he tossed the album onto the coffee table. Dad built something tangible. I create architectural visions. What do you make besides money? For years, Elise had contorted herself, bending beneath their expectations, erasing her victories. No more. She retrieved a folder from her purse, laying it on the coffee table with deliberate calm. This is the deed to the cottage. You signed over your half 3 years ago when Nolan needed capital for his restaurant failure. Own it now. Solely. Her father finally looked up, confusion etched into his lined face. Elise's words pierced the familial delusion. You're welcome to contest it, Elise said, her tone razor-sharp. But Jenna Morales, my attorney, ensured the paperwork was airtight. 15 minutes later, Elise walked back to her car, hands trembling but head held high. The tremors weren't weakness. They were adrenaline from years of buried courage surging to the surface. The decision to sever ties was no longer a possibility. It was a necessity. The next morning, her phone buzzed incessantly. Cousins she hadn't heard from in months suddenly grew concerned for her mental health, parroting her mother's narrative of Elise's emotional instability. "Did she mention they sent me a fake wedding invitation?" Elise asked Uncle Robert. The awkward silence answered better than words. Her laptop glowed as she began cataloging every transaction, every financial lifeline she had extended to the family. The spreadsheet expanded, each entry stripping another layer of illusion from their relationship. By Tuesday, her office became a war room. Aunt Maxine arrived, deli bags in hand, her quiet support a bomb against the emotional siege. "Thought you might be skipping lunch," Aunt Maxine said, placing a sandwich on the desk. Elise barely had time to thank her before the intercom buzzed. "Miss Hartman, your parents are in the lobby. They don't have an appointment." Elise straightened, glancing at Aunt Maxine. "I need to handle this myself." When her parents entered, her mother wielded crocodile tears like a weapon. "How could you abandon your family? We've always been there for you." Elise remained seated, a subtle shift in power dynamics. "That cottage hasn't been in our family for years. You sold it to my company. The documents are thorough." Her mother's performative grief dissipated, replaced by cold calculation. Elise laid the signed papers on the desk. "If you wish to contest, all communication will go through Jenna Morales," Elise added as Jenna herself entered, poised and professional. The confrontation ended with Jenna escorting them out, their stunned faces a tableau of lost control. Within the hour, Elise met with Thomas Bedford, her financial advisor. The dismantling of joint accounts and legal safeguards was executed with surgical precision. Each signature Elise scrawled felt like another chain unshackled. When her phone rang again, it was building security. "Miss Hartman, your brother is creating a disturbance in the lobby. He's demanding to see you." Elise's voice was calm. "Please follow standard protocols for unauthorized visitors." 15 minutes later, another call. Nolan's wife, Kendra, her voice shaky. "I saw everything. I had no idea he could be like that. I'm outside your building." Elise glanced through the window and saw Kendra's figure, hesitant but resolute. This wasn't over. The battle lines had been drawn, but Elise was no longer standing alone. Kendra stood near the fountain, phone pressed to her ear, shoulders hunched against the spring breeze. "He told me you refused to help with the wedding, that you were jealous of our happiness." Her voice cracked. "But that wasn't true, was it? You never even knew when it was happening." The admission hung between them. "I'm sorry," Kendra whispered. "I should have questioned why you weren't there." From Elise's office window, she watched Kendra brush hair from her face, the diamond on her ring finger catching sunlight. 3 weeks married and already seeing through Nolan's facade. Thomas discreetly stepped out, giving them privacy. "Why are you telling me this?" Elise asked when the door closed. "Because I recognize the look on his face today," Kendra said. "It's the same one my father had when he threatened my mother. I'm not waiting 30 years to admit what I'm seeing." The sincerity in Kendra's voice cracked Elise's well-built walls. Could someone so tied to her pain become an ally? Or was this another trap? Later that afternoon, Aunt Maxine appeared at Elise's office carrying a worn leather briefcase. "I've been keeping these for years," she said, laying out folders with printouts of emails, text messages and financial records. "Your mother never deleted anything. She thought she might need leverage someday." Elise flipped through pages exposing years of exploitation. Jenna arrived, scanning the documents. "This strengthens our position on the cottage considerably," she said, selecting damning emails. Thomas confirmed that additional security measures were implemented on Elise's accounts. "They won't access anything now." The following morning, Jenna's call brought news that made Elise sit down abruptly. The judge granted the restraining order. They can't come within 500 feet of your workplace or residence. Aunt Maxine called that afternoon. Your cousin Rebecca cancelled her bridge game with your mother. She couldn't look her in the eye. The dominoes began to fall. Uncle Stephen removed them from the holiday rotation. Grandmother's oldest friend refused their dinner invitation. Nolan's drinking escalated as Kendra moved back to her parents. When the eviction notice for the cottage reached Elise's parents, the consequences they had never imagined possible came due. Elise traced the embossed letterhead of her holding company, the same company that had bought the cottage when they couldn't afford the taxes. A week later, her parents arrived at her office, escorted by Pastor Williams. Elise didn't take his outstretched hand. Your parents thought it might help to have someone neutral, the pastor began. There's nothing neutral about someone who's sat at our Christmas table for 20 years, Elise replied. Her mother's voice wavered. We've been praying about your behavior, Elise. Elise laughed softly. My behavior. Her father spoke about family legacies. Pastor Williams urged forgiveness. Elise laid 2 envelopes on the reception desk. This is the invitation I received. And this is the real one Aunt Maxine showed me. They sent me the wrong date on purpose. Pastor Williams faltered. Elise continued. They've used me as a resource, not a daughter. I've funded their lifestyles, patched their financial disasters, and received deliberate exclusion in return. Her mother interjected. After all we've sacrificed for you. Name one sacrifice you made for me that wasn't for Nolan. The silence became their answer. Elise handed her father a manila envelope filled with cropped family photos. I'm releasing myself from the obligation of being your daughter. Stan from security stepped forward. Everything all right here, Miss Hartman? Yes, Stan. My visitors were just leaving. Her father's threat lingered. This isn't over, Elise. It is. 2 weeks later, Aunt Maxine informed Elise of Nolan's job loss and crumbling marriage. Elise felt only distant pity. The first letter arrived from her father. Elise left it unopened on her desk, relishing the power of choice. A year later, sunlight poured into her lake house office. No family portraits adorned the walls, only landscapes she captured herself. Her phone rang, a client interested in her boutique marketing approach. The wall calendar displayed personal milestones. Half marathon, a photography workshop, and a week in Montana. The mail brought another wedding invitation, her cousin Rachel this time. The RSVP included a handwritten note. Elise checked her calendar. The wedding clashed with her photography retreat in Maine. She declined graciously, sending a gift chosen from genuine affection, not obligation. That evening, Aunt Maxine, Thomas, and Jenna gathered for dinner. They toasted to boundaries, found family, and the strength to start over. Later, Elise opened her father's latest letter. It held no demands, only acknowledgement of failure. She placed it in a wooden box, a part of her story but no longer her burden. Beside her lay a mentoring program brochure and travel plans for Portugal. Healing wasn't about rewriting the past. It was about building a future on her terms. Elise Hartman stood by the panoramic window of her lake house office, the morning sun casting warm streaks across the polished hardwood floor. A year had passed since the confrontation that severed her from the toxic grip of her family, yet today felt like the true beginning. The past 12 months had been a painstaking reconstruction of identity, brick by brick, but the foundation was now solid, immovable. Her phone chimed with a notification. Jenna Morales had forwarded an email. Subject: Hartman Family Trust Disbursement Review. Elise's pulse quickened. 4 years, the family trust had been Nolan's playground. His failures cushioned by its hidden reserves. But the financial audit she had initiated months ago had finally started to bear fruit. Jenna's note was concise. They're scrambling, Elise. And they know you hold the final vote. The same family that had written her off was now forced to acknowledge her authority. It was poetic in a way that no vengeance-fueled fantasy could match. Not a roar of triumph, but a quiet reclaiming of power. The intercom buzzed. "Miss Hartman, Kendra is here." Elise smiled, remembering their last conversation by the fountain. Kendra had chosen to walk away from Nolan, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She was one of the few who had seen through the Hartman illusion and chosen truth. "Send her up," Elise said, straightening her blouse. Kendra entered, her steps more confident than Elise remembered, though the familiar wariness still lingered in her eyes. "I heard about the trust review," Kendra said, perched on the edge of the leather chair. "Nolan's been in a tailspin. He never imagined you'd fight back this hard." Elise tilted her head. "He never imagined I'd see myself as worthy of fighting for." Kendra smiled softly. "I admire you, Elise. I only wish I'd had half your courage back when I married into this mess." Elise leaned forward. "You're out now. That takes its kind of bravery." Their conversation was interrupted by a call from Thomas. "Elise, the audit findings are ready. They'll be public record by next week. I suggest we prepare a statement. This will get messy." Elise thanked him and hung up. Kendra's gaze lingered on her. "Are you ready for them to come at you again? They won't go quietly." Elise's eyes hardened. "They can scream as loud as they want. I won't be silenced anymore." Later that afternoon, Elise met with Jenna and Thomas in her office. They laid out the timeline. The trust's mismanaged funds, the tax evasion hidden beneath layers of family business ventures, and Elise's legal positioning. The walls her family had built to shield their abuses were crumbling, brick by deceitful brick. "They'll try to spin this as you destroying the family legacy," Thomas said. Elise's lips curved into a cold smile. "It was already in ruins. I'm just sweeping up the rubble." The following week, Elise stood in the gleaming conference room of a downtown law firm, facing the very family who had once erased her from their lives. The Hartman family trust meeting had always been Nolan's stage. Today it was hers. Her parents sat stiffly at one end of the table, Nolan beside them, his arrogance frayed to raw edges. Across from them sat Elise, Jenna, and Thomas, fortified by evidence, legality, and, most importantly, resolve. Nolan leaned forward, sneering. "You think you can take this from me?" Elise met his gaze, unwavering. "I'm not taking anything, Nolan. I'm ensuring what's left doesn't get buried under your failures." Documents were passed around, signatures demanded, and accountability enforced. The power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. When the meeting concluded, Nolan's facade cracked. "You're nothing without this family, Elise. Remember that." Elise stood, gathering her papers. "I've never been more than nothing to this family, Nolan. That's the difference. I remember." As she exited the firm, the weight that had shackled her for decades finally lifted. No more apologies. No more proving her worth. Weeks passed, and the family fallout became town gossip. Nolan's failed ventures became a public spectacle, his charm no longer a shield. Her parents retreated from their social circles, their influence tarnished by exposure. Elise, however, thrived. Her boutique marketing agency flourished, drawing clients who admired her tenacity. She took on mentorship roles, guiding young women navigating male-dominated industries. One evening, Elise returned home to find a small package on her doorstep. Inside was a photograph, an old family picture from the lake cottage, one of the few where she stood in the center, smiling genuinely. No note accompanied it, but Elise knew Aunt Maxine's careful touch when she saw it. She placed the photo in her office, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder. Healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about reframing it on her terms. The battle wasn't over. Family scars run deep, and the Hartmans would not fade quietly into history. But Elise no longer lived in their shadow. That night, Elise stood on her balcony, the lake shimmering under the moonlight. Her phone buzzed, a message from Kendra. "Dinner this weekend. Aunt Maxine's bringing her apple crumble." Elise smiled, typing her response. Wouldn't miss it. As the screen dimmed, she realized the story of her life had finally become hers to write. Elise Hartman sat in the center of her lake house office, the once intimidating walls of family expectations now replaced by the calm solidity of reclaimed wood and her own framed photographs. The faint scent of lavender drifted from a nearby diffuser as she reviewed the final draft of her statement for the Hartman Trust press conference. This wasn't just a corporate update. It was her final act of liberation. The Hartmans had spent decades crafting an image of untouchable prestige, a facade Elise was now poised to dismantle with a single public address. Jenna entered the office, legal briefs in hand, her eyes sharp yet supportive. It's all lined up, Elise. The press release, the legal notices, and your address. Once you deliver it, the Hartman legacy shifts forever. Elise closed the folder with a calm finality. It's not about revenge, Jenna. It's about truth. They spun lies for too long. It's time the world knows what built this empire. The event was scheduled at the Grandview Conference Hall, a venue her father once described as the place where reputations are made or broken. Elise intended to make full use of that prophecy. Kendra and Aunt Maxine joined her backstage as the hall filled with journalists, business leaders, and curious onlookers who had followed the Hartman scandal's slow unraveling. Kendra clasped Elise's hand. No matter how this plays out, Elise, you've already won. You've broken the cycle. Aunt Maxine added, her voice laced with pride. You've built something they can't tear down yourself. The lights dimmed. Elise took a deep breath, the last vestiges of familial guilt evaporating as she stepped onto the stage. She began not with accusations, but with acknowledgement. For years, I believed that family meant unconditional acceptance. That love could be earned through sacrifice, through loyalty, through silence. Today, I understand that family isn't defined by blood, but by the respect we offer and receive. Her speech detailed the financial manipulations, the emotional erasure, and the silencing tactics she had endured. But Elise refused to let the narrative spiral into bitterness. Instead, she pivoted. From this day forward, the Hartman Family Trust will be restructured into the Elise Foundation for Professional Equity, dedicated to supporting women entrepreneurs who, like me, were told their success must be hidden in the shadows of others. The applause was immediate, genuine, and thunderous. Reporters flooded the floor with questions, but Elise remained composed. This isn't about vengeance. It's about visibility. No more hidden contributions. No more silent sacrifices. That evening, back at the lake house, Elise hosted an intimate dinner. Aunt Maxine, Kendra, Jenna, and Thomas filled her kitchen with warmth, laughter, and stories not tied to obligation but chosen kinship. As the night wound down, Elise found herself standing on the deck, the moonlight glinting off the calm lake waters. Thomas joined her, holding 2 glasses of wine. "To freedom," he said, offering a toast. Elise clinked her glass against his. "To rewriting legacies." Her phone buzzed, a familiar name flashing across the screen. Nolan. She stared at it for a moment, the weight of years encapsulated in a simple ring. Then, calmly, she silenced the call. Some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt. The next morning, Elise awoke to an inbox filled with messages from women across the country sharing their stories of invisible contributions, of being written out of narratives they had built. Elise spent hours reading each one, replying where she could, ensuring they knew their stories mattered. Later that week, as she prepared for her mentorship workshop, an unexpected letter arrived. This time, it wasn't from her father or any other Hartman relative. It was from a young woman named Mia, a budding entrepreneur who had been inspired by Elise's journey. "You gave me permission to believe that my voice deserves space," Mia had written. Elise's eyes welled with emotion. This was the true legacy she had crafted. The suspense of what her family might attempt next no longer held power over her. Their tactics had become background noise against the symphony of her narrative. On the eve of the foundation's official launch, Elise hosted a gathering at the Lake Cottage, the once contested symbol now transformed into a hub of empowerment. The space was filled with photographs of the foundation's early beneficiaries, with laughter echoing off walls that once bore witness to whispered betrayals. As the guests departed, Kendra lingered. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked softly. Elise gazed around the room, then at the lake shimmering under the night sky. "I regret waiting so long to choose myself. But I don't regret where that choice has taken me." With the moon as her witness, Elise Hartman finally embraced the serenity of a life defined by self-respect, by chosen family, and by a legacy of authenticity. The story wasn't about the Hartmans anymore. It was about Elise. And her story had just begun.